Welcome to Biography with Plutarch, where we embark on a fascinating journey through the lives of history's most captivating figures, seeking to unravel the intricacies of human nature and distill timeless lessons from their experiences. Today, we turn our attention to one of ancient Rome's most infamous emperors, Nero, a man whose name has become synonymous with tyranny, extravagance, and artistic expression. As we delve into the complexities of his life, let us begin by examining the early years and formative experiences of Nero, for it is in these nascent stages that the seeds of his future character were sown. Nero was born on December 15, 37 AD, to Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus and Agrippina the Younger, a member of the prestigious Julio-Claudian dynasty. The birth took place in a grand villa in Antium, a coastal town not far from Rome, amidst the warm glow of golden sunlight and the soothing sounds of the Mediterranean Sea. As the young Nero first drew breath, the Roman Empire was still reeling from the death of Emperor Tiberius and the ascension of Caligula to the throne, an event that would set in motion a chain reaction of power struggles, intrigue, and bloodshed. The young Nero's family was marked by both nobility and notoriety, with his father being a man of questionable character and his mother, Agrippina, being a woman of cunning and ambition. Ahenobarbus, Nero's father, was a descendant of a noble family, but his reputation was tarnished by his own scandalous behavior. He was known for his love of horses, women, and wine, often indulging in drunken debaucheries and violent outbursts that would leave his family and friends cowering in fear. In stark contrast, Agrippina, Nero's mother, was a woman of considerable intelligence and guile, who would play a pivotal role in shaping her son's early life and future destiny. As a child, Nero was surrounded by the intrigues of the imperial court, where the constant jockeying for power and position would have undoubtedly left an indelible mark on his young psyche. The palace was a labyrinthine complex of corridors, chambers, and gardens, filled with the whispers of servants, the rustling of silk garments, and the soft clinking of wine cups. Nero's early years were spent navigating this treacherous landscape, where alliances were forged and broken with ease, and where the slightest misstep could prove fatal. According to historical accounts, Ahenobarbus became so intoxicated that he began to insult the emperor, prompting Caligula to remark that he would have been better off if his son had been born to any other man. This incident not only highlights the tumultuous nature of Nero's family life, but also foreshadows the future conflicts that would arise between Nero and the Roman aristocracy. The story has it that Agrippina, who was present at the banquet, was mortified by her husband's behavior and immediately began to plot a way to protect her son from the fallout. As Nero grew older, he became increasingly influenced by his mother's ambitious designs for him. Agrippina, who had married Emperor Claudius after Ahenobarbus's death, began to groom her son for a life of imperial power, recognizing that his position as Claudius's stepson made him a potential heir to the throne. Under her guidance, Nero received an education befitting a future emperor, studying rhetoric, philosophy, and the arts, with a particular emphasis on music and poetry. His tutors, who were handpicked by Agrippina, encouraged his natural talents and nurtured his creative spirit, recognizing that artistic expression could serve as a powerful tool for self-expression and emotional release. The historical context of Nero's early years was marked by significant events that would shape his character and future path. The reign of Emperor Claudius, who had ascended to the throne in 41 AD, was characterized by a series of public works projects, military campaigns, and administrative reforms. However, Claudius's rule was also marked by a growing sense of paranoia and mistrust, as he became increasingly obsessed with the threat of conspiracy and assassination. The atmosphere in Rome was tense and foreboding, with whispers of plots and counterplots circulating through the corridors of power. As Nero navigated his early adolescence, he found himself caught between the competing influences of his mother's ambition and the intrigues of the imperial court. His natural talents as a musician and poet were encouraged by his tutors, who recognized the therapeutic value of artistic expression in soothing the young prince's troubled mind. Meanwhile, Agrippina continued to manipulate events from behind the scenes, skillfully orchestrating her son's rise to prominence through a combination of strategic marriages, calculated alliances, and ruthless eliminations. One notable example of Agrippina's cunning was her manipulation of Emperor Claudius, whom she married in 49 AD. By marrying Claudius, Agrippina secured her position as empress and gained control over the imperial household, allowing her to promote Nero's interests and pave the way for his eventual succession to the throne. Her influence over Claudius was so great that she even convinced him to adopt Nero as his own son, thereby solidifying Nero's claim to the throne. The formative experiences of Nero's early years had a profound impact on his development as a person and a leader. The constant exposure to intrigue, power struggles, and violence would shape his worldview and inform his decisions as emperor. His relationship with his mother, Agrippina, was particularly significant, as she instilled in him a sense of ambition and a desire for power that would drive him throughout his life. As Nero's star continued to rise, he found himself increasingly at the center of imperial politics, with the intrigue and machinations of the Roman court swirling around him like a maelstrom. In 51 AD, Emperor Claudius formally adopted Nero as his own son, granting him the name Nero Claudius Caesar Drusus Germanicus in a grand ceremony that solidified his position as heir apparent. The adoption was a calculated move by Claudius to secure his legacy and ensure a smooth succession, but it also marked a significant turning point in Nero's relationship with his mother, Agrippina. Agrippina, the cunning and ambitious matriarch who had masterminded her son's rise to power, began to see her influence over Nero wane as he started to assert his own independence. She'd been the driving force behind his adoption, using her charm and guile to manipulate Claudius into making Nero his heir. But now that her goal was achieved, she found herself struggling to maintain control over her increasingly headstrong son. As Nero's confidence grew, so did his desire for autonomy, and he began to chafe against the constraints of his mother's influence. One of the most notable events of Nero's early reign was the construction of the Golden House, a grand palace complex that would serve as the emperor's primary residence. The palace's design was said to be inspired by the mythical palace of the sun god, Helios, with its soaring arches, glittering mosaics, and intricate frescoes that seemed to shimmer in the light. Thousands of workers labored tirelessly to bring Nero's vision to life, their sweat and toil fueling the creation of a structure that would be remembered for centuries as a symbol of imperial excess. Nero's passion for the arts also led him to establish the Neronia, a festival in honor of the gods that featured competitions in music, poetry, and athletics. The first Neronia took place in 60 AD, and it was a grand affair, with participants from all over the empire gathering to showcase their talents in a riotous explosion of color and sound. Nero himself participated in the games, competing in events such as chariot racing and singing with a fervor that bordered on fanaticism. His performances were often met with applause, although some critics accused him of bribing the judges to ensure his victory. Despite these allegations, Nero was undeterred, driven by a fierce desire to prove himself as a worthy successor to the great emperors of old. Nero's relationships with his contemporaries were complex and often tumultuous, like the shifting tides of the Roman Sea. One notable example was his friendship with the philosopher Seneca, who had served as Nero's tutor and advisor during his early years. Seneca's influence over Nero was significant, and he played a key role in shaping the young emperor's thoughts on governance and morality. The two men would often engage in lively debates about the nature of power and the duties of a ruler, with Seneca urging Nero to adopt a more measured approach to statecraft. However, their relationship eventually soured, and Seneca was forced to retire from public life due to Nero's growing paranoia. As Nero's reign wore on, he became increasingly obsessed with his own legacy, seeking to outdo his predecessors in terms of grandeur and spectacle. He invested heavily in public works projects, including the construction of roads, bridges, and aqueducts that would facilitate trade and commerce across the empire. His military campaigns were equally ambitious, with victories in Armenia and Britain adding to his reputation as a skilled and fearless leader. The Roman people were initially enamored with their young emperor, who seemed to embody the very spirit of Rome itself. But as time went on, Nero's extravagance and love of luxury began to create resentment among the population, who felt that their emperor was more concerned with his own pleasures than with their welfare. In 64 AD, a devastating fire swept through Rome, destroying much of the city and leaving thousands of people homeless. The exact cause of the fire is still debated among historians, but Nero was quick to capitalize on the disaster, using it as an opportunity to rebuild the city in his own image. He commissioned the construction of a new palace, the Domus Aurea, which would be even more grandiose than the Golden House. The rebuilding efforts were massive, with teams of architects, engineers, and laborers working tirelessly to create a new Rome that would surpass the old in terms of beauty and splendor. As Nero's reign continued, he became increasingly isolated from his people, surrounded by sycophants and yes-men who dared not speak truth to power. The Roman Senate, too, grew increasingly disillusioned with Nero's rule, viewing him as a reckless and impetuous leader who was more concerned with his own glory than with the welfare of the state. The tensions between Nero and the Senate simmered just below the surface, waiting to boil over into open conflict. In 68 AD, the dam finally burst as a series of rebellions broke out across the empire, challenging Nero's authority and threatening to topple him from his throne. The emperor, realizing that his time was running out, became increasingly desperate and erratic, ordering brutal suppressions of the uprisings and executing anyone suspected of disloyalty. But it was too late, for the die had been cast, and Nero's fate was all but sealed. As the rebellions spread like wildfire across the empire, Nero's grip on power began to slip, and he became increasingly isolated within the opulent walls of his palace. The once majestic halls, adorned with intricate frescoes and marble statues, now seemed to closing in around him, as if echoing the suffocating weight of his own paranoia. His mental state deteriorated rapidly, like a masterpiece crumbling under the brushstrokes of madness, and he became convinced that the gods themselves were conspiring against him. The whispered warnings of the augurs, the ominous flights of birds, and the unsettling tremors of the earth all seemed to confirm his worst fears, that the universe was aligning itself against him. In a desperate attempt to cling to power, Nero ordered the execution of anyone suspected of disloyalty, including many innocent people whose only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The streets ran red with blood as the imperial guards, fueled by fear and ambition, carried out their emperor's decrees with ruthless efficiency. The Roman Senate, sensing their chance to strike down the tyrant who had long oppressed them, declared Nero an enemy of the state and sentenced him to death. The senators, once cowed by his majesty, now openly reveled in his downfall, their voices rising in a chorus of condemnation as they stripped him of his powers and his dignity. In June 68 AD, as the imperial guard closed in on him like a vice, Nero fled Rome in a desperate bid to escape the humiliation of capture and execution. The city he had once ruled with an iron fist now seemed determined to crush him beneath its heel. He abandoned his palace, leaving behind the trappings of power and the memories of 1,000 excesses, and made his way to the outskirts of the city. There, in a small villa on the Via Salaria, he took his own life, rather than face the ignominy of being paraded as a prisoner through the streets of Rome. The news of his demise sent shockwaves throughout the empire, as if the very foundations of the world had been shaken. Nero's death marked the end of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, which had ruled Rome for over a century with a mixture of wisdom, madness, and tyranny. As the news spread like wildfire through the city, the Roman people rejoiced, relieved that the tyrant who had brought them so much suffering was finally gone. The streets erupted in celebration, as if the very air itself had been cleansed of the poison of his presence. The citizens of Rome, once cowed by fear and intimidation, now openly mocked their former ruler, ridiculing his pretensions to divinity and his grotesque excesses. Despite his tumultuous reign, Nero's legacy is complex and multifaceted, like a rich tapestry woven from threads of gold and darkness. He was a patron of the arts, and his love of music, poetry, and architecture helped to promote a cultural flowering in Rome that would be remembered for centuries to come. The poets and musicians who had once flocked to his court, eager to bask in the radiance of his favor, now sang his praises in more muted tones, acknowledging the debt they owed to his generosity, even as they distanced themselves from his tyranny. His public works projects, including the construction of roads, bridges, and aqueducts, improved the infrastructure of the empire and facilitated trade and commerce, leaving behind a lasting testament to his vision and his ambition. As the Roman historian Tacitus observed, Nero's tyranny was not without its benefits, for he encouraged the arts and improved the city's amenities. Yet, Nero's darker qualities, including his ruthlessness, extravagance, and paranoia, ultimately led to his downfall. Like a colossus crumbling beneath the weight of its own hubris. His reign was marked by violence, oppression, and terror, and his name became synonymous with tyranny and despotism, a byword for the dangers of unchecked power and the corrupting influence of absolute authority. As the centuries passed, Nero's reputation only grew more infamous, as if the passage of time had distilled the essence of his tyranny into a concentrated poison. He became a cautionary tale about the dangers of allowing ambition to consume us, of permitting our baser instincts to guide us, and of forgetting that even the most powerful individuals are not immune to the forces of history. His legacy serves as a reminder that the consequences of our actions can have far-reaching and devastating effects, like ripples spreading outward from a stone cast into a still pond. Today, Nero is remembered as one of the most fascinating and complex figures in Roman history, a man whose contradictions and flaws continue to captivate historians and scholars. As the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle once said, "The whole is more than the sum of its parts," and Nero's life is a stark reminder that even the most seemingly invincible individuals are ultimately subject to the whims of fate and the judgment of history. We see in him a reflection of our own capacity for greatness and for evil, our own struggles with the conflicting demands of ambition and compassion. His story serves as a mirror held up to the human condition, revealing the darkest recesses of our own hearts and the highest aspirations of our souls. And so, we return to the words of the great philosopher, who reminds us that true wisdom lies in recognizing the complexity of human nature with all its contradictions and paradoxes. That's all for today's biography with Plutarch. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, remember that understanding the lives of remarkable individuals helps us better understand ourselves.